Hey guys, it's a legend. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Real Quarantine Show. You know what? We've got a bit of a bonus for you because not only do we have a brand new episode, we have actually classic episodes. Because before we came to you, we were on another network and we played a bunch of cool shows. Andy, tell the people what you thought of those old shows.
It's all these shows are great. I mean, I always say, our what we do is for the love of the business. We've had great episodes. I've been able to talk with some of the guys from Puerto Rico about Puerto Rico memories. We've talked a lot of history. One of my favorites is talking not once but twice with the Tennessee stud Ron Fuller.
I mean, that's incredible. I would never have thought a year ago, a guy who loves wrestling history, that I would ever have a chance to actually talk and ask questions to the Tennessee stud. That was amazing. Elio, what kind of great memories do you have on this show?
Yeah, there are so many great episodes, and we've had a couple that come to mind. Of course, Continental, the Ron Fuller episodes, both times we had him on, as well as one of my favorites, the Madison Square Garden Glory Days.
Oh, yeah. And we've had some great people. We've had D'Lo Brown, Savio Vega. We've had some really fun guys. We've had some great old veterans. We've had some young up and coming stars. And that's what this show is, you're going to see in the future, is going to be all about that. We're going to encapsulate history. We're going to talk about topics of today. We're going to talk about the things that you guys want to talk about. And these little background, these classic episodes of ours, we'll go back, revisit some of the things we've done in the last year. And off and on, we'll be going forward with a whole bunch of new things. So we look forward to seeing you all. Welcome back to The Real Quarantine. Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of WPOV Quarantine. I'm your host, the legend T. James Logan. With me, my two co-hosts, as always, the lone wolf, Andy Anderson. Andy?
Pleasure as always.
And the gentleman, Elio Canella.
Great to be here.
Well, you know what, guys? This week, we have a returning guest who, I got to tell you, has been one of my favorite guests that we've ever had on the show. And that's not even blowing smoke up his ass, because this guy told some great stories. I'm a big fan of his podcast, which we will all talk about, too. And let's just welcome the Tennessee stud, Ron Fuller. Ron, welcome aboard.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much, man. Glad to be back with you. I really had a great time last time, and I'm looking forward to today. I think, still got some stories. I got a story or two left in me for sure, and really glad to be with you.
Well, you know what? First off, we're going to have to say I really fell in love with your storytelling by listening to the Studcast. That is that podcast you do with the history of wrestling, which covers from your grandfather, I believe, till up and through your career. And it's amazing stuff, Ron. I mean, I'm spellbound listening to it. I listened to all those whole bunch of chapters that you weren't even in it yet, and it was so great.
Well, I appreciate that very much. It's basically a history of my family, and started back with my grandfather, and when he started in 1924, almost 100 years now. We've been in it, and it goes all the way through. I'm 200 episodes in, and still only in 1977 in my career. So I've got another 400 episodes maybe before we get to hockey, if I decide I want to go on into hockey.
Oh, you definitely have to. From the last time you were on our podcast and talking about your involvement in minor league pro hockey and some of the fun times you had with that, I think you definitely have to talk about that.
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Well, I probably will. If I last that long, guys, I'm kind of an older fella then, so I got to be able to make it another 5 or 6 years.
So, I do believe you were just wrestling. You were just wrestling a year or two ago. I'm pretty sure you got a ton of years left in you, Ron.
I hope so.
So you know what? One of the things that regularly started on the podcast, and we'll just quickly do a quick here, is the involvement of your grandfather in wrestling. This is like the 20s, I believe?
Yeah, 20s.
Yes. And this is where the idea of what wrestling becomes now to what it was before, as these sort of like dragging on for hour bouts.
your grandfather gets the idea of making this more of a show spectacle, and this is how the genesis of what wrestling has become. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, my granddad was trained, and we may have talked about a little bit of this. I won't go back in too much detail about this, especially if you can remember what we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandfather was trained by a real old-time shooter out west named Dutch Mantell. Not the Dutch Mantell that wrestles now or that did wrestle in the 70s and 80s. This is a guy from early 1900s. And so, and he learned to shoot, and shoot matches were longer matches, and they were starting to evolve in the early 1920s away from shoot matches into professional wrestling is somewhat similar to what we saw in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So, my granddad, he was there when matches were sometimes half shoots. And then, he decided that when he left Columbus, Ohio, where he began his career, it was one of the first wrestling territories in all of wrestling back in those times. And he went to Tennessee, where there was no bona fide shooting wrestling or very few wrestling matches, period. And created his own territory. And you're right. He kind of dropped off those shooting type matches that would last an hour, and fans would not see much action, to being able to give them some action and create some stars that could do a little more up and down than what was the old style.
Okay. Now, as the years go by, this wrestling starts developing at the pace your grandfather wrestles, your father wrestles. I want to ask you. So we cut to you, say, in high school. You're a very tall guy. You're 6'9". You're playing basketball. You're going to college. 100%. Were you going to be a wrestler at that time? Was that in your head, like, I'm going to be a wrestler, or were you trying to find other sports? How did you feel at that time?
There was never a doubt. I never had a doubt in my mind that I was going to be a wrestler. Man, when I'm a third generation wrestler. So I grew up watching my granddad when I was really young, 6, 7 years old. He was still in the ring, and his 3 brothers, and then obviously I watched my dad all the time growing up because he had been wrestling long before I was born. So, my brother and I never considered doing anything else. And I was a pretty decent basketball player in college. I played at Clemson University and played at University of Miami. And I could have even played some pro ball if I had really wanted to. But honestly, back in those days, I was in college from 67 to 1970. And wrestlers were making more money than basketball players back in those days.
I just want to touch on the basketball real quick because I think I recall hearing a story, maybe it's a partial story or something like that. Why the move from Clemson to Miami?
Well, to be honest with you guys, when I went to Clemson, it was spring break and there was nobody on campus. And I was there for 2 days and never saw hardly anybody on campus. But they never told me that, that it was a military school, for one thing. You had to take ROTC. Ooh. And secondly, it had about 8,000 guys and 800 girls on campus. Yeah. So I spent a year there. Wow. I was like, wow, what in the heck is this all about, man? I mean, you couldn't get a date, And then what they did, and because Clemson had a tradition, it was a military school. If you were a freshman, they shaved your head when you got there.
Wow.
Oh. So then you didn't get to compete with the rest of the guys for looks on the campus to get a date because you were bald headed, right?
Oh.
So and so after I finished my first year at Clemson, I told my coach, I said, I'm not coming back. And he goes, oh, Ron, he goes, they all say that. And I said, no. I mean, I'm not coming back, coach. So then I end up at the University of Miami. which was much better situation. About 10,000 guys and 10,000 girls. So,
a lot better scenery.
So I hate to say it, but I picked my college because of women.
I'm sure you're not the first and you're not the last.
Yeah.
That's probably true.
A man who knows his priorities. That's to be realistic.
Yeah.
So you know for sure you're going into wrestling. Now, I asked the guys as I was leading into, like, is there any particular questions that you want to make sure that we cover? And Elio wanted to make sure that we brought up to ask you about your first match, your first professional wrestling match. What do you remember about it, and what are the memories of that?
All right. Before, can we do that? I want to throw in a little more basketball. I don't know if y'all are big basketball fans. If you're big basketball fans, my last year at the University of Miami, we played some of the greatest basketball teams in the country that year. UCLA they had won 6 or 7 championships in a row. They obviously had a great team. I played against Artis Gilmore. I played against really, really tremendous talent, Sidney Wicks and Curtis Rowe, all kinds of great players at Miami, at the University of Miami. And I got to tell you one story here about my dad. Last game of the year, we're playing against Jacksonville, which was Artis Gilmore. And Artis Gilmore was about 7'2", weighed probably 270 or so. And my dad says, he said, Ron, you're never going to play basketball after this game. He goes, why don't you do something in this game that's going to make you a national star? And I said, what are you talking about, Dad? How the heck am I going to make myself a national star in one game? And he says, all you got to do is, he said, you catch that big Artis Gilmore coming running down the court. And he said, you scoop slam him on the court. And he was right. I instantly went, oh gosh, are you serious? He goes, yeah, I'm serious. He says, if you do that, you'll be in every paper all across the country. He said, then you can tell them you're going to be a wrestler. So that was probably should have done it. Looking back at it, I kind of wish I had done it. But my first wrestling match, guys, you're probably going to have a hard time believing this, but my first wrestling match, my grandmother and my great-grandmother was there, and my grandfather, Roy Welch, the same guy that owned the Tennessee Territory. And I wrestled tag team match with my dad. And we wrestled against Dick Dunn and Don Carson.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I don't know if you're familiar with these guys, 2 great workers, man. They were huge stars in Australia for many, many years. Tag team champions. They went around the country in the South, mostly in the southern United States, but really great workers. And so it's my first match. And, and I was big. I was already 6'9", and I weighed probably 250 or so. And those guys were much smaller than I was. And I remember they dressed in a dressing room beside us, but they had a hole in the wall so you could talk. And they looked over there at me and they told my dad, because they'd known him for years, they go, does he know how to work? and Dad like, well, yeah, he knows a little. And then they call me over. They said, come here. And well, I go over and they say, you're not going to hurt us, are you? I go, God. No, I go, this is my first match. I just want to get through it, man. So anyway, we go out to have the match. And in the early part of the match, Don Carson he knows my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And Roy is not sitting in the building because he used to wrestle there. He stands way in the back of the building so that nobody sees him. And they sit on the first row. And so Don Carson gets me in a hammerlock, and he takes me down face first on the mat, and he's cranking my arm. And he looks over there at the 2 of them, and they're already screaming, let him go. He's just a young boy. And he screams, oh, you grandmas. He goes, I'm going to break his arm. Right. And, oh boy, they got really upset. And then they finally got so mad and angry And nobody in the crowd knew they were related to me, obviously. And my great grandmother was probably 75 years old at this point. And so they both get up out of their seats and they come to the apron of the ring. And he just drags me toward the middle of the ring where they can't get in there and reach him. And he keeps it up. Oh, I'm going to really hurt him now, Grandma. And he would stomp me in the head and then get the arm back. So this went on for probably 6 or 8 minutes, right? They were getting real heat, especially with my grandmas. And then the policemen come down. They kiss my 2 grandmas and they carry them out. I watch them and they escort them out of the building. So Roy goes around the building and he meets the police and he goes, "Hey, wait a minute. That's their grandson up there in the ring, and you can't take him to jail." And then they recognized who he was and the whole deal. So my very first match, both my grandmas almost got arrested, and
Wow.
it was an unusual start, that's for sure.
How old were you for your first match?
I was I was 21. 21, just fresh out of college. Might have been 22 actually. But I was young, man, and didn't have much knowledge about it. Actually, what I did, guys, is I started wrestling 2 years before I got out of college, and I would sneak around the country in small places. My dad wanted me to be a wrestler, and he would get me booked, and that's why we got booked. And it was in Blytheville, Arkansas, where I wrestled this match, which nobody was ever going to find out that as a basketball player, I was a professional athlete. I could have lost my scholarship for 2 years. He booked me in Mobile, Alabama, Blytheville, Arkansas, Tupelo, Mississippi, all these little small towns. And I would just go in and maybe wrestle 3 times in the summer for the 2 years before I actually started wrestling full time.
Wow.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Now, when you first started wrestling, obviously people know who you are and your connections. Was there a struggle for you in the beginning? Like, was it hard for you being the son of such a famous man and the grandson of such a famous man? Was that a tough thing, or do you think that helped a lot for the beginning of your career?
I think it was both ways. I think it went both ways. I mean, I think it helped the fact that it was a recognizable name. My dad wrestled as Buddy Fuller and not Welch. My granddad wrestled as Roy Welch. My dad wrestled as Buddy Fuller. And my brother and I wrestled as Fuller. So, but, in the area in where we started out originally, which was Georgia, it was an area where my dad was one of the promoters, one of the owners, and he was well recognized there. And that was beneficial because fans knew a little of the history, and they would get more involved in your match, and they would. It probably was easier to become somewhat of a star. But at the same time, when you start, you're so green and your matches aren't very good. It's, it can be bad, just as bad, because they would expect more of you than what you're seeing,
Right.
So it was good and bad, both good and bad, that situation.
We talk about that lately with AEW and Brock Anderson, the son of Arn Anderson, and he just had his first match on TV. I think it was like last week or 2 weeks ago, and that's kind of what we were saying. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, and it's really tough because he's going to be put under the microscope because it's like, well, he's the son of Arn Anderson, so you're expecting so much more, but at the same time, it's like, hey, give the guy a break. It's his first match. If it was anybody else, it wouldn't be a big deal. It'd just be, oh, it's his first match. But it's the son of Arn Anderson, so all of a sudden expectations get raised that much higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, they certainly do. Arn's a great friend of mine, obviously, worked for me quite a bit. In fact, I just did his last show with him. I don't know when this one will air in relationship to that, but his last show I did with him and Conrad, and we spent the entire show talking about Southeastern and Pensacola, or the territory in which Arn really got his start. And so, Arn a great worker, but you're exactly right. Brock he's got a leg up, but at the same time, it's a detriment to him to have a daddy that everybody expects him to go out there and be just as good as his daddy.
Right.
You know,
and that's what we said. It's like,
match.
yeah, Arn didn't get that way in one match or overnight. That took years, right? And it's the same thing. People are just expecting him to step in here and be, oh, okay, well, you're the son of a legend.
Well, and ironically, you also brought up something interesting, Ron, is something that would have been beneficial for him, but you can't really do in these days. Is I suggested it wouldn't have been good if they'd thrown him under a mask and let him wrestle some places outside of AEW to get him some ring feel, so that when he goes on television, he looks a lot more comfortable and everyone thinks it's his very first debut. But
that's a great idea.
Yeah, but obviously you can't really do that in the way it's set up these days. That's kind of a hard thing to do. So, I mean, obviously that was beneficial for you to get that real ring feel while not having to deal with any pressure of winning or losing or who you are. You're just this mask guy that's come in, but you're getting real ring training. I actually did that too. I actually wore a mask in Mobile, Alabama, in 1969, the year before I got out of college, and my dad, they asked him, he was there. He wanted to see the match, so he came to Mobile. I came in from Miami. He came in from Mobile, from Atlanta, I mean, and they asked him, what's his name? They had the mask for me. And he said, what's his name? And Dad looked at me and they said, they call him Paul Bunyan. I don't know if y'all ever remember the old joke, man. Yep. The old big guy with the hawk and all that. He said, call him Paul Bunyan. I was like, oh, come on, Dad. Give me a decent name, right? So, it was funny. It was funny getting started. But, you're really right about the, wearing the mask. And I feel bad for Brock. It's going to be tough for him to be able to make his way, but wow, he comes from good stock. I mean, Arn is one of the greatest, man, and I'm sure Arn's spending a lot of time with him, as my dad did with me and my brother, when we were just starting. Well, we definitely are in this kind of age where they're not going to get like that kind of skill up that you got a chance to do, but. Take in mind, it took The Rock a couple years before he clicked too. So in this day and age, you still, those genetics can work and those skills and stuff can come to the forefront. So I'm sure Brock Anderson has got a good career ahead of him. So you're cruising along now. You've been wrestling. How long was it till your brother came into the picture? How long did his debut come in? He
actually started before I did.
Oh,
he began when I was still in college, and he was very thin, but Rob was always a good worker, and he would give me hell every time I came home because I was in college and I couldn't wrestle, and I didn't have any money down there in Miami. I was a long way. Family lived in Atlanta. I was down in Miami. I couldn't buy, I couldn't eat like I needed to and all that stuff. And I would come back home to visit, and he would flaunt his money in front of me. Hey, Ron, can I buy you a steak? Looks like you need something to eat, right? He said, because I'm working, I got money, right? And I didn't have. So it was kind of difficult. I really wanted to start, but I wanted to finish the college career too. And so it made sense for me to go ahead and stay.
Okay. Now, I have two more brotherly questions coming in here before we move on. And the first one is, obviously you guys got to tag together. What was that like the first time, tagging with your brother? You guys are a tag team going up against legitimate opponents.
Oh, it was, we were both lost. We were both lost in the ring. It's like when you're a lot better off when you're a young guy and you're starting tagging with somebody who's been there, somebody who knows the skills and knows how to do things, and can take care of you, get you in there when you need to be, get you out of there when you need to be, and that type of stuff. So we had a learning process there. But we were so lucky. We started in Georgia which at that point had such tremendous talent in that territory. Nick Bockwinkel was the champion. My dad and Ray Gunkel were tag teams. The Assassins was the team on top, the champions there. That was Jody Hamilton and Tom Ernesto, the two originals. God, those guys were fantastic. And about 2 months in, before we left the territory, 2 months in, after I had started, they put us in a long program with the Assassins, probably a 4 straight matches. And wow, that's where you really started to learn. If you had those type of guys that could lead you out there, you got better quick. And that was the real benefit of being the son of a star. We were the son of a star. That my dad was a huge star there. And, unlike Brock, who probably won't get in that situation for quite a while, where he ends up working with some of the top guys. We ended up in a great spot and worked with the Assassins in maybe 3 times a week for 4 weeks straight. And that kind of stuff was a real step up for a young guy.
Okay. Now, as you're teaming with your brother, did you ever consider that you guys might stay a team for a long time, or was it always that you wanted to be a singles wrestler?
I end up being a singles wrestler. We tagged a whole lot in that first 6 months. I started in May of 1970, and I went to Florida in I think October of 1970. Rob stayed in Atlanta. He didn't go, but it was a difficult. It was difficult not being able to go to have a partner. I mean, we had wrestled so much as partner. And when I got to Florida, I had no partner, and they put me in single matches. It took me a while to get into the swing of things with single matches, but it's when you leave one territory and go to another back in those days, especially when you're a young guy, they didn't take any better care of me there than they did any other young guy. They treated me just like everybody else, which I appreciated that. I didn't want to go down to Florida and them start treating me great, put me on top when I wasn't ready to be there. And if they do that to you, you kind of create enemies. It kind of creates enemies for you. People see that your family and your relationship and who you know has a lot to do with where you are on the card. And I never wanted that, and they sure never did that for me in Florida. I had to work my way from first match up to the top the hard way. I had to earn it.
That's excellent. Excellent. Okay, so the last question I'm going to ask just around this time concerning your brother is, did you guys have like a lot of brothers end up in wrestling having to feud with each other? You obviously had to feud at sometimes with him.
Yeah, I actually did, but not for many years, not for probably 15 years.
Wow.
Did anything like that arise? Didn't go there. Then we got to finally once we got into southeastern down in Pensacola, 15 years after we started, I became a heel and he was a baby face. We didn't work against each other very often, but I formed my stud stable and I had a bunch of heels that were working for me. I was managing some really top dudes, and then we actually in our careers never wrestled, I don't believe, but one match against each other.
Wow.
So it was really strange. We tried not to get that combination together, and I don't think Rob liked to work with me. I was stiff. I was very stiff, and Rob wanted to avoid having matches with me, probably.
No one wants to get slapped by their brother.
Got into much of that.
Okay. So as your career goes on, you end up buying into. We talked all about continental wrestling, and I want to kind of switch over to from the wrestling aspect to your mind here? You become such a booker who has, you lay out such great ideas that a lot of people talked about, really made Southeast wrestling kind of revolutionary in some of the ideas. Explain to me that process of like being able to come up with just these great ideas.
Well, being creative, man, it's just a part of that. It's a natural part of professional wrestling. I mean, you can have matches, but you got to have angles. You got to have something that people can bite into and something they can get into. And and I'd grown up in the wrestling and then seen a whole lot of things. And I was lucky. I got to do some figure finishes and form in St. Louis, Sam Muchnick's territory when I was wrestling there some in 73 and 74. I was already getting to where I could figure finishes, and that's kind of the start of being able to figure angles is when you can put together a good finish, then you graduate up to being able to figure out an angle that fans aren't going to expect. And what I always tried to do once I got my own company is I tried to just outthink people, the fans. I didn't want the fans to ever know what to expect when they came to the building. And I think I was able to do that. Probably it may have taken me 2 years as the booker before I actually could make that happen. I bought my first company in 1974, Southeastern in Knoxville. And by 1970, late 76, we were doing big business. And then from then on, we did tremendous business. And we did a lot of things that nobody had ever done. We had Cadillac tournaments, which my dad had Cadillac tournaments before, but he never did what we did with the first Cadillac tournament I ever had in Southeastern in Knoxville. We sold out the Coliseum, and it was Ronnie Garvin against Bob Armstrong. And Bob Armstrong won the Cadillac, and we had the Cadillac. Instead of leaving the Cadillac outside the building and not putting the emphasis on it, we drove the Cadillac in and set it to where everybody could see it in the Coliseum. And then when Garvin won, Garvin lost the Cadillac, and Bob won. Bob was down selling. Garvin went straight to the Cadillac, and we had those steel stanchions that you see that you hook the little velvet cords that's cordoned off people, keep them away from the car. Yep. We had those stanchions around the car, and Garvin just unhooked the velvet cord and picked up that steel stanchion and threw that big steel stanchion right through the front windshield of that brand new Cadillac.
Wow.
I mean, nobody had ever seen anything like that. Nobody had ever done that, I don't believe, ever in wrestling before. And, wow. I mean, people just like, they got their big pop when Bob won, and then they got their downer, man, not 15 seconds later, because Garvin he buried that thing in that front windshield with that Cadillac. So,
and even to this day, you don't mess with a man's vehicle, so that's something.
Yeah, and the great thing about it is people, we had 6,000 people in a building that was probably supposed to hold 5. And all those fans could go and stand and look at it and marvel at it. It was a 4-door pink Cadillac back in 1977. And, fans were just mobbed that car all night long, covered it up. And then to see that happen, it was a shock. So, that's what wrestling was all about back in the day. I mean, when we ran our companies, we wanted to shock them every night. We wanted them never to know what was going to happen. And finally, I think people quit trying to figure out what was going to happen, and they just enjoyed coming just to be a part of it. Like, wow, what are you going to do tonight? So, yeah, that was a real element. You had to have it if you were I had the smallest wrestling territory probably ever at that point. And we were outdrawing a lot of the major territories. We had a territory that was truly on fire and full of tremendous talent. A lot of them from Canada, Ronnie Garvin, Joe LeDuc, we had a lot of guys, Mongolian Stomper from Calgary, I mean, wow, we were loaded with Canadians that were really fantastic wrestlers, and wow, we lit it up, man. It was in a territory that had never had any business like that. They ran in a little small building. They had a coliseum that seated 5,000 plus, and they ran in a little mighty small building. And when I bought it, my whole plan was to get in that coliseum every week, sell that sucker out. And it took about 2 years to do it, but once it started, it never stopped. It just consistently sold out.
Wow. And you know what? Just going back for a second to the Cadillac thing. I mean, here you have this great story where you put together. It's a culmination. The big good guy, the big bad guy, facing off for a giant trophy, and the bad guy loses, but instead of just skulking away, he ups the ante even more after losing. Now you want to see him get his ass kicked again by Barb Armstrong because now he's done something even worse, despite the fact he's lost. And that's just brilliant.
I mean, it just enhances the angle. Your big angle is the finals. Normally, your big angle is the finals, and that's what everybody wants to see. But boy, when he did that, I mean, I think we did a bigger crowd the next week because we brought back the Cadillac again, and we put money up. Garvin put up $20,000 against the brand new Cadillac, and Bob walked away with his money that night. I mean.
Wow.
It was the things like that really made the territory work. And it's the talent. You got the guys that can do anything, and then you give them the angles that they need, and then the heat that the heels need, and you're gonna make money in wrestling. That's what the keys were.
Now it's sort of funny because that story was one thing one of the guys had put on the list if we could ask about was the Cadillac thing. So you've already even covered that. Guys, you were asking me something to bring up about Elvis, I believe.
I'm glad you said, I mean, Susie said pink Cadillac. I'm like, this is the perfect segue for Elvis.
Tell us a bit about Elvis, Ron. I know you had some kind of thing going on there.
Oh yeah, man. We went to Mobile when I was 10 years old. In 1958, we moved out of Mobile. My dad's first territory that he ever made spectacular was Mobile and the Gulf Coast of the United States, Mobile, Pensacola, New Orleans, all along that coast there. And he made a huge success out of wrestling there. And then he sold out to three relatives, three of my cousins, his first cousins. He sold the business to them. And he went to Memphis that was dead, Memphis, Tennessee. And when he went there, the first night they drew 300 people. 2 years later, they drew 30,000 in another Cadillac tournament finals with Sputnik Monroe against a guy named Billy Wicks, and Joe Louis was the referee.
Wow.
And Memphis's baseball stadium that could hold that many people. They just cranked that business up big time. Now, Elvis was there back in those days. He lived there. He'd lived there for years. And he was a huge wrestling fan. He was watching wrestling all the time. And then he got in touch with Dad, and he said, can I come down to Ellis Auditorium? They were in Ellis Auditorium on most nights. Big old building, huge building. And selling it out every show. And he said, so Dad said, sure you can, and he said, come in the back door, because they had a big stage there. And there was a curtain that, so people couldn't see who was standing on the stage. So Elvis would show up there after all the people were in the building about the second match with his entourage. That was the big deal. We're all rock stars, two limos. 2 limos full, and they would all come in and they'd stand in the back there and they watched the matches. So, he was a huge fan. So then Dad, we had a big farm. In fact, Dad was really making huge money. Memphis was just exploded into a tremendous wrestling city. And Dad, got into a bidding war with Elvis over a farm that both of them wanted. And Dad ended up getting the farm. And so Elvis, like I said, he was a big fan anyway, and Dad knew him. and we had a wrestling ring in our barn. We had a bunch of horses, and we had a wrestling ring in the center of the barn. And Dad invited Elvis out to teach him a little wrestling.
Oh,
And I remember as a kid, I was 10. I was in the 6th grade. I was 12 years old, I guess. And watching from me and my brother up in the top of the hayloft, watching Elvis Presley and my dad in the ring in the barn. And Elvis was a big star then. He was already a huge star. And he probably came 3 or 4 times to the and when he came, his whole entourage came. Obviously, everybody came with him. But it was a huge thing as a kid, man, to see a guy like that right there. 30 feet away from you, down below you, looking down on Elvis Presley, wrestling your dad.
One of the biggest stars in the world.
wow.
In your barn.
No kidding. Yeah, in the barn. Yeah, and
Man.
And he's gonna pass out here. He is. Wrestling and Elvis is his 2 favorite things.
I'm a huge Elvis fan. My oldest daughter, she's 7 years old. Her name is Presley. And I've spent time in Memphis, time in Nashville, and I always say people talk about Disney being the happiest place on earth, and I say for me, Tennessee is my Disney because that's my happiest place on earth.
Oh, it's a beautiful state, man. I've been living in Florida for 20 years. I just moved back to Tennessee about 3 months ago.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
so glad to be back home, and I'm right now 25 miles from the entrance to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Beautiful.
Wow, it's just fabulous here, man. There's no place like Tennessee. God's country is what I call it.
Amen. Yes, sir.
So obviously, I'm trying not to go too far into Southwestern just because we covered a whole episode with it, and I wanted to try and get some different things. Do you guys have any other questions you want to ask Ron as we go forward here?
I'll go first, Elio, if that's okay. I'm just wondering, Ron, who are some of the opponents, some of the guys that you worked with that maybe didn't get the accolades or the attention that maybe they deserve? Some of the ones that went under the radar, some of the underrated guys that, given a chance or different opportunity, maybe could have had a bigger impact in the business.
Ronnie Garvin's one.
Yeah.
I don't think Ronnie Garvin got his due until after he left Southeastern and went into the Carolinas, and they finally kind of started putting him on top. Joe LeDuc was a tremendous damn wrestler and a hell of a worker, and deserved better. I was really lucky, guys. I got to work with some of the all-time greatest stars. 73 and 74 when I was in Florida, and I had won I finally worked my way up and won the Southeastern belt. I was wrestling with Buddy Colt, Paul Jones, some really, really good guys like that. And then I would fly to St. Louis on Fridays and work with Terry Funk and Johnny Valentine, Gene Kaninsky, working with some of the really big names in the sports. And, I had great opportunities. And Sam Muchnick, the president of the NWA, he really liked me, kind of fell in love. And, and he booked me in every St. Louis show for 2 years in a row, which usually meant if you did that, that you had potential of getting the big belt at some time. And I think maybe in 74, if I hadn't have gone and started my own wrestling company in Knoxville, I think I might have had a shot at it. But once you became a promoter and you decided that you're going to make your living by owning a wrestling company and running a wrestling company, you lose all the consideration for being picked as the champion at that point. Right. So, but no, there's so many guys that were underrated, man, that were really, really good people. Jerry Stubbs, Mr. Olympia, tremendous wrestler. God, I wish you'd give me the question earlier. I could have probably given you 15 names, man, off the top of my head. But it's a shame. So many guys that didn't get the push that they should have gotten, and lots of times the guys that were on top in some places didn't deserve to be. But it was really funny when you put the wrong guy on top, you sacrificed your own business. So I was always cognizant of that. I didn't want to take guys that just because they were a big name and I didn't think that they could do what they should be able to do. I usually didn't put them in that position. So a guy like Arn Anderson, we just talked about. Arn came along. He started for me doing jobs on TV and worked his way up to being main event, over a period of 2 years. And you got great talent, man. There's so many talented people. Gosh, we trained so many people in Southeastern, so many great stars. Hulk Hogan started for me. The Honky Tonk Man started for me. David Schultz started for me. And there's another. I wish the heck I could remember all of them right now that did start. Arn Anderson came through there. Mr. Olympia came through there. Just a litany of great guys that went on to have huge careers. Started back in those days with me, and and you had to recognize them as having talent. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that was just part of owning a company. You had to be able to say, this guy can do it, and that guy can't. And we were lucky. Always had a bunch of really good stars. Toward the end in Southeastern, once Bob Armstrong boys started growing, Brad Armstrong. I don't know if you guys are really familiar with Brad.
Yep.
He to me was one of the greatest workers ever. I mean, that kid was absolutely phenomenal, and he never got the real push that he should have gotten either. And so there's a lot of guys that never got that push, and that's a shame for the really good ones that they didn't.
Okay. Well, you know what? I have to ask this question then. Is we talked about this too just before we came on air. Was this wrestler was a bit of before our time, and we were just me and Andy have read and Elio at the end of his career barely anything, but when we talk to older wrestlers, and yourself included, they talk nothing but praise for Bob Armstrong. Could you just tell us a bit what was so special about Bob Armstrong? Because he was before my time, but I've heard the name and the legend. Can you tell us a bit about him?
Oh, gosh. Maybe absolutely one of the greatest of all time. No doubt about it. Bob was a tremendous athlete, and and then oddly enough, he was a dancer. His mother owned a dancing studio. Bob was a Marine. He went to the Marine, and he wasn't just a Marine. He was voted the best Marine in his entire troop when he went to training. And Bob and I became so close. My gosh, closer than anybody. He was like a brother to me. And he told me stories about, he said when he was in Marine training that his mother got sick, and they had a dance studio, and that he was such a good dancer that she called up the commandant at Fort Wood Benning, and not Benning, but at the big place, Lejeune or whatever they trained the Marines, and asked the commandant if she could have Bob come home for 3 weeks to teach her classes. And so all the Marines found out about it. When Bob left, they were going, "Where are you going?" They never let anybody go. When you're in there in the Marines, that you don't get to leave the training and go do some special favor for somebody. So it was a big deal. And he said he came back, and he said they were all waiting on him, all the guys. And when he came through the door, they were all, "Oh, look, the dancer's back," all that stuff. And and then they started, some guy said something smart to him. And Bob said, I asked him, well, what did you do when he said that? And he said, I laid him out, Ron. Which I'm sure that's exactly what he did. But he was such a tremendous wrestler, and not just that, a tremendous human being. I mean, he had 4 sons. All of them grew up to be great guys, very successful, no problems ever from any of them, and a fantastic wife, and just worked with me for so many years. He worked with me in southeastern Knoxville for 3 years, and when I went to Pensacola and opened that company in 1978, I gave him part of the business. I brought him into my family, made him like a member of my family, and got him into the company with me, and he never left. We're talking about angles, guys. A little bit earlier, that reminds me of an angle I want to tell you guys, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this angle, but we did something in 1982 with Ric Flair and me and Bob Armstrong that turned my company around down there. We were always doing big business, but when we did this angle, it just exploded the company. And it was about the time Bob's boys were about ready to start wrestling, and I had my brother and Jimmy Golden, my cousin, who was a great worker. Another guy that never got the credit he should deserve was Jimmy Golden, who was Bunkhouse Buck for WCW. Tremendous worker. But anyway, we worked an angle down there. They talk about freaking people out, and that's what we tried to do. We knew we had Ric Flair coming. I was a baby face. Bob was a baby face. We'd been a baby faces for 3 years. And so Ric Flair was coming, and I talked to Bob. I said, Bob, we need to do something really good in this particular match. Flair was going to defend his world title, and the week before he got there, we had a tournament, and ended up 2 baby faces in the finals, me against Bob, to see who was going to wrestle Flair the next week. And I won. I beat Bob. And the next day, on the next TV show before this World Championship match, Bob came on with me. I'm making the interview to wrestle Flair, and he stops me and he goes, Ron, he goes, I know this is unusual. I apologize if I'm in the wrong, but I know you're going to win the World Championship 3 days from now, and I want to be in the ring. I just want to be a part of it. I want to be the man that counts Flair out. And, he says, would you let me, or could I possibly be the referee? I just want to be there when I raise your hand and give you that 10 pounds of gold. One of those great interviews that people at home, they're watching 2 baby faces that have wrestled like crazy to get there. And so then when Flair comes to town, we're going to turn Bob heel that night. We got 10,000 people in the auditorium in Mobile, Alabama. And I tell Flair the finish. I've been thinking about the finish for a whole week, and I tell him that I get halfway through the finish, and he goes, Ron, he goes, you're going to get us killed. I said, no, Rick, it's going to be hot. It's going to be a hot match. He goes, no, you're going to get us killed, Ron. So anyway, so we turned Bob heel, and Bob never been a heel in his entire career. He's probably been wrestling at this point by 25 years, 20 years at least, maybe even more. Never been a heel in his life. And he turns on me that night. They bust me up. I'm bloody. They throw 10 guys that try to come in and save me over the top rope. He jumps off on my bad knee. I had to get arthroscopic surgery anyway. So, I take off for 6 months, and then I come back after 6 months, and me and Bob start going at it. He's a heel. But he turns out to be one of the greatest heels I have ever seen in the business. A lot of people will never know that if they don't see some of the interviews and some of the things that Bob did to make himself a heel. Just to show you how different he was to everybody else. He never smoked. He started smoking on interviews. He grew a mustache. He never had a mustache before. He smoked cigarettes while he's doing his interviews. He had a girlfriend. Everybody knew he was married. All of a sudden, he had a girlfriend. Her name was Fannie Mae Titweiler. Fannie Mae Titweiler, and Fannie was all the time giving him presents. Every week he had, look at this watch. Fannie Mae give me this watch. Oh my God, and I'm the baddest bitch around now. He was absolutely phenomenal as a heel. And then we did crazy stuff like we had Brad Armstrong, his son, who was working on TV. Bob's the heel. Brad's the babyface. Brad's working a babyface match with Ricky Gibson, another guy that never got the credit he deserved, Ricky Gibson. And Ricky hurt his leg, and Brad wouldn't cover him. Brad wouldn't take the win. And Bob got in the ring, and he got in Brad's face. And Brad said, no, Dad, I'm not going to do it. It's not right. No, I shouldn't, and I'm not going to do it. And Bob slapped him. Yeah, wow. I mean, right there, just something as simple as a slap, but it's your kid, right? And everybody knows what an ass you are. Talk about getting the heat. Your heat jumps up a big level when you go slap your babyface kid on TV. And, and then he ended up slapping the commentator 2 weeks later. Bob is just a phenomenal talent, a phenomenal guy. And he one of the great losses to the business of all time. And my best friend ever.
That's awesome.
Wow.
It's and this is so ironic too. Is what just 2 weeks ago we did an interview with Rip Rogers, and he had said we were asking him about favorite opponents, and he said hands down his favorite the man he got in the ring who he thought was the most incredible wrestler ever was Brad Armstrong. He said that man was the best wrestler he'd ever been in the ring with, and just to hear that his dad too was on that caliber that's just amazing good stuff. Wow. Thanks, Ron. That was awesome. Now these guys know me, and you said a name that because you said the name, of course, I'm like a dirty dog on a rag here. I got to ask. I need to know about Mongolian Stomper. He is a hero for us up here in Canada as the Stomper. He wasn't the Mongolian there. It took me years to realize he was the same guy, but we knew Archie Goldie up here as one of the most devastating bad guys, but we didn't get to know a lot about him. Just the way the business was. Can you tell me a bit about Archie Goldie?
Oh, God. First, I got to tell you, I loved him, man. I absolutely loved Archie. Archie came to work for me in Southeastern in let me just get the year right, 1977. And I mean, Archie, to me, was the consummate heel. He was absolutely perfect as a heel. And I had him with several different managers over the time frame. He went, after I sold out Knoxville and went to Pensacola, he came and went with me down there to Pensacola. He was just a phenomenal talent. And we did some things. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about this one. We did some things with him and Joe LeDuc that's never, ever been done before. Nobody will ever do it again. They came to me and asked me one day out of the clear blue. They were in an angle and had been working together. Talk about great matches. Joe LeDuc and the Mongolian Stomper. I mean, in blood. Oh my God, man. I mean, really, really, really tough matches. They came and asked me, I thought there was a rib. Joe says to me, first Stomper says, Archie says, Ron, he goes, Gorgeous George Jr. and I have been talking about something. We want to have a contest between me and Joe LeDuc, take over 2 or 3 weeks on TV. And he says, I want to sit in the middle of the ring, put a concrete block on my head, and have Gorgeous George Jr. break it with a sledgehammer. And I go, you're going to do what? And he goes, yeah, I'm going to put a block on my head, and I'm going to have Gorgeous George Jr. stand behind me and hit me in the top of the head with a sledgehammer. I was like,
Wow.
and then I was like, are you kidding? No, you're going to kill you. Are you serious? Archie, you might kill yourself. And he goes, no, but then he goes, next week, the following week, I want Joe LeDuc to do it. I want him to do the sledgehammer and the concrete block. So we actually, in a 2-week period of time, did this concrete block angle that, it was, guys, it was the most awesome angle I ever saw. We recorded the breaking on Joe LeDuc's head, in slow motion with a slow motion camera so that we could show it back and get the full effect of it. And, Joe went to hospital. It almost broke Joe's neck. And we had to carry him out right there on TV, had to stretch him out on TV. And I told them before I allowed it, I said, I'm not going to take any responsibility. I don't want to see it. I don't want you to do it. And they said, we'll do it, Ron. And if we get hurt, it's on us. And, they did, Archie was just phenomenal. He was great, man. It didn't make any difference who he worked with. And, he was the biggest star we had, the biggest heel we had in Southeastern, and we fed him some of the greatest baby faces in history, man. We fed him Bob Armstrong, myself, my brother, Jimmy Golden, Ricky Gibson, Thunderbolt Patterson, just a litany of great baby faces that went through there. Archie took them all. One time or another, he took them all. But we sold out towns after towns. Fans went crazy. First time Archie ever showed up there, it was in a 2-ring battle royal. And he came to the ring. He had no manager that night. He came to the ring by himself. And I don't know if you guys know much about the 2-ring battle royals, but you end up with two guys, and they end up in ring 1. Wrestle the 2 guys that end up in ring 2. You got 2 rings side by side. And then the winner of that match gets the money, whatever the money is. That night, it was a $10,000 check that went to the winners of the deal, $5,000 to each guy. And so Archie had never been seen. It was his first time ever in Knoxville. Coliseum's full. And he goes in, and in the match, in the tag part of the match at the very end, it was my brother and Jimmy Golden against Archie. And it was Archie and my brother, actually, against 2 other baby faces. And Archie just goes in. They don't even ring the bell. He's in the last part of the match. He just attacks Jimmy. He stomps him in the belly and then stomps him in the head. He attacks his partner and does the same thing to him, and then robs his own partner. They basically already won the match. And then he attacks Rob. He throws him in, kicks him in the belly, stomps him in the head. And then they come and give him the check. And he ate the check. he just took it, stuffed it in his mouth, and chewed it up and ate it, right? Everybody in that building was just going crazy. They'd never seen anything like him. And it never stopped. He just got stronger and stronger.
Okay. I one question, obviously Archie isn't around to ask, and one of the big confusions I had growing up was the fact that when Archie wrestled for us in Stampede in Canada, he wrestled as the Stomper, and he spoke, and he was well spoken, and he did all his interviews. And I never connected the two for so long because as Mongolian Stomper, he never said a word. Did he ever say why he was so clear about the distinction between these two characters? Is this just something he wanted to keep very distinct?
Yeah, he did. When he came, I'd never seen him with speaking English. He was in Florida a little bit when I was there in '73 and early '74, and he had a manager then. And I just assumed he had always had a manager. I wasn't aware that he would talk. He was talking up there in Canada. Mm-hmm. But he told me, I said, we got to get you a manager. His first manager was Don Carson, who was a really great talker, and then we got Gorgeous George Jr. for him, which was another great combination. Him and Gigi were really, really good. But I wasn't, obviously I knew he could speak English. I knew he could talk. But I think it was part of what got him over there so big is the fact that he didn't talk, and the fact that he used to do these great interviews, and he'd have Gigi as an example as his manager, and he would stand behind him, and he had this big truck spring. Have you ever seen the deal I'm talking about?
No.
It was a big spring like on a truck, but it had a handle on each end of it, and it was made out of steel. And he would stand there behind whoever his manager was, and he would pop that thing down.
Yes.
God,
yes.
and it would make his shoulders just wow. It just made him look unbelievable, man. You know, he was a monster. And fans were horrified of him. They would run over each other. We'd have riots, not trying to get to him, trying to get away from him. You know, he really, really got over tremendously for us.
Okay. That is so awesome. You know, like I said, he's been a big favorite of ours up here, and I never even knew growing up that he was the same guy as the Mongolian Stomper, because every day I'd see him come on Stampede Wrestling and talk, and he was so vicious the way he was there that, wow, that's incredible. Now I want to talk a bit about your book, but before we do, just really quickly, because I just you brought up a name that I never really associated for a while, and that was another guy who had a good career up here, was David Schultz. Could you just tell me a tiny bit about David Schultz before we go into your book?
Oh yeah. David's a great guy. David Schultz was trained by my grandfather Roy's brother Herb, and David's got one of the greatest stories, man. He's done the Super Stud cast with me, and he told me this story, and I'd never heard this story before. But he was going to be trained by Herb, and Herb was my grandfather. Roy was a hell of a shooter. Herb was a hell of a shooter too. And just a really, really ruggedly tough guy. And David went to work out with him. The very first time they ever worked out, David said, Ron, he said, I thought, you know, but since I was bigger and probably stronger than Herb, that, you know, I'd be able to handle myself pretty good. And he said, Herb just manhandled me like I was a baby. He was like, God, I could do nothing against him. And he said he kept me there for 3 hours. He said he did everything you could possibly do to hurt somebody. And then he said he went home, and he said he went home and he had to call his wife on his cell phone when he got home. He said, baby, you got to come out here and help me get out of the car because I can't make it to the house. Because he said, this guy's killed me today. And Dave worked with us, man. He went with me when we started in Pensacola, southeastern Pensacola in '78, and I put him pretty much on top. And we worked some tag matches together. Dave was a tremendous talent, a really, really big time talent, and a damn tough guy. And you know. And I don't know if y'all got all of his stories or ever heard all of his bounty hunter stories, but wow. I mean, that guy's lived one hell of a life. I talked to him 3 days ago. As a matter of fact, I talked to him quite a bit. He lives in Tennessee on the far side of the state, and he drives sometimes. He drives a cotton truck. You know, they have a lot of cotton fields over in that part of the country, and he drives a truck every once in a while just for the hell of it. But tremendous wrestler and a tough son of a gun. You had to watch Dave. He was really out there. You know, sometimes when we first went down to Pensacola, he was working with a black guy, and I can't remember which one it was, to be honest with you. Burhead Jones. It might have been somebody like that. And he came to TV one day, and he had a watermelon. And you know, there you go. So you can imagine where this is headed, right?
Yeah. Yes.
You know, but you know, and I neglected to ask him what he was going to do with it. But you know, wow, we almost lost our televisions. You know, it was really bad. But Dave was something else, and you know, still a great guy. And wow, just a pleasure to know him, man. And he worked for me starting in 1976 on into the 80s.
Okay.
Before he went big time.
Yeah. Well, I know we could probably go on and on, but I want to talk to you a bit right now about a book that you did. You did a non-wrestling book, and I want to talk about what was the impetus of that? What brought that story in, and how did that come about?
Yeah, I wrote a book about a lion, man. And I was living in Tennessee at the time. I was about 30 miles from the Smoky Mountains, and I had a dream one night, and it's a crazy dream. It's one of those dreams. I don't know if you guys have ever had one, in which you wake up and you go to sleep and you start dreaming the same dream. It's like a dream that went all night, and the dream was about a lion, a man-eating lion in Africa that gets sent to America, into a zoo, into America. And then he eventually escapes from the zoo, and he enters the Smoky Mountains, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And, and if you guys have been in that part of the country and down around that, this area where I'm at right now, it's unimaginable what a lion could do in the loose here and how they'd ever find him, And, so I had the dream and I woke up the next day and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to write a book. I got to write this book. And she says, what book? And I go, the dream I had last night. I dreamed a book. I dreamed this book, and I got to write it. So, I spent 2 years down in the basement of our house writing a book, and I'd never written a book or even thought about writing a book. And it turned out to be a pretty darn phenomenal book. I got it it's on Amazon, and I also sell it on my website. I got more than 50 5-star reviews on it on Amazon, and half of the people that reviewed it say it's Jaws. It's another Jaws. And I'd love someday to see it be a movie. It would make an absolutely chilling movie. It would be really good. But so I guess I'm an author. I've even got a Facebook site as an author, and the name of it is Author Ron Fuller website. And it's been really, really, really doing well, and it's different. It's a totally different book, and everybody that reads it and that I know. But they want to talk to me about it. That's what they want to talk about. Oh God, let's talk about Brutus. The name of the book and the name of the lion is Brutus. They want to talk Brutus. But, it's just another thing I guess I've done that probably most people never do. Write a book. Might as well. I've done just about everything else. Right? Been in the hockey business. I've been in the ADT business, wrestling business, written a book.
Yeah. You've had
such
a everything career, yeah. We didn't even get a chance to talk hockey. I know we talked a little bit last time we had you on about some of the crazy things you did to promote hockey and to make it so much sellable. Combining some of the pro wrestling ideas of presentation into entrances and whatnot. So that is pretty good. Can we expect another book from you in the future? Do you think?
Well, I don't know, man. I would love to be able to write the sequel. This book ends up, the last page on it opens the door for another lion, and so I'd love to be able to see it someday become a movie, and then have a sequel, where the son of this there's a birth of a lion child for this lion that is the biggest lion ever born captivity at its birth, and that would be the next Brutus. But, so I'd love to do it, I really enjoyed writing the book. Never done anything like that before. And I used to do my stuff all at night. I don't know how most writers were, but I'd go down at 10 o'clock and write all night. I'd come back up at daylight and go to bed. I just really got into it, and wow, I miss it in a way. So, but I may write a book. I should write a book about my family. I really want to do that one. I'd like to do one. I want to call it 100 Years in the Ring. We're the only family, the largest and the oldest. We're the only one that's got this type of history, and I'd like to write that book too.
Yeah. Now, if there's a fan listening to this, a wrestling fan who wants to try out your book, they can also order it from a website from you said?
Yes. My website is tnstud.com, and I have it. It's on there. I autograph it if you want it autographed. It's on Amazon. You can find it on Amazon. Amazon Brutus novel is the keywords, BRUTUS novel. Or you can get the autograph version by ordering it from me, directly from me, from my website. The book is $19.99 on my website. I think it's $16 on Amazon, and the autograph version is $29.99. And I don't just autograph it, but put the name on it. I make a little note to everybody that orders one that wants autographed, and
personalized
little special thank you. Yeah. So yeah, it's but yeah, anybody that's interested in a thriller, a story that could possibly happen. In fact, not too long ago here in Knoxville, they found a tiger loose. Somebody saw a tiger loose right here on the edge of the Smoky Mountains.
Oh.
And it was national news. And I was like, wow, my story's coming to life. Look at this, man. This is going to turn out to be really happening. And what happens in this book could actually happen someday.
Wow. And now, okay, so we have that book. We'd be remiss if we didn't once again also mention your podcast. That's a weekly endeavor, I believe, right?
Yes, I do a weekly podcast called Studcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did an episode. I'm doing episode 205 tomorrow, 205th episode. I'm up to 1977. Archie, since we were talking about him, is in the main event with me, actually, in this upcoming episode.
Wow.
And, so I do that. I do once a month, a Super Studcast, I call it, which is a Patreon product. It's $2.99. It's 3 hours. And I've done so many wrestlers. I've done Andre and my brother and Bob Armstrong and David Schultz and, Honky Tonk Man, Coco Beware, the Jim Cornette. It just goes on and on and on. I've done 42 of those now.
Wow.
And it's like it's $2.99, and they're all 3 hours or more. It's like a deep dive into whoever it is. We just start with your lifetime, and we do 3 hours. It's pretty remarkable stuff. And so, that's at the same place. If they want to go to tnstud.com, they can get every Studcast is on there. Every Super Studcast is on there. And if they want to do a Super Studcast, they can also get the Super Studcast at patreon.com/Studcast. And so they can get it either on my website or at Patreon, the Super Studcast. All the Studcasts, every one of them are on my website, and they're also available on all podcasts. Just about every podcast outlet carries a Studcast.
Well, fans, we'll make sure that we have a lot of those links placed underneath the description here of the YouTube video you are watching or listening to. And by all means, I have listened to the Studcast quite extensively before I even talked to Ron, and I was just amazed at the amount of stuff. Me and Elio talk about it. We started late, and it's into 200s, and they're long. But man, I'll tell you, when you sit down and listen to them, they feel like they just go like that. It's just like.
Kind of like today's episode here.
Yes. I want to thank you, Ron. This was amazing. It's always so incredible to talk to you. You're such a rich a rich fountain of information and stories and so much good positivity about wrestling. And I want to thank you for taking the time to come on here and tell us your stuff.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. I enjoy it. I mean, God, I'm really lucky to have been born into a great wrestling family and be born into a wonderful business. And you know, I'd like everybody to know just what it was all about. And, you know, I appreciate every opportunity, and especially don't get to talk to many people up there, up north where you guys are. And, you know, it's a real pleasure, man, and an honor. You guys get down here to see me. You know, come by and see me, man.
Be careful, because I'll take you up on that. I got to get back down to Tennessee, so I'll take you up on that.
I'll be dragging Andy back. I'll be dragging him back. Before we let you go, Ron, Elio just sent me a message. Can we give the name of your YouTube channel?
Yes, my YouTube channel is a brand new one, guys, and it's Southeastern Rewind. And basically, that's the name of my first company, and and what we're going to do there is something that's never been done, I don't think, ever on YouTube. I'm gathering up all my wrestling shows that I still have. I don't have much of the Southeastern Knoxville TV shows because didn't keep them, but I have Southeastern Pensacola shows starting back in the David Schultz days, since we mentioned him, and even some Hulk Hogan, a lot of old stuff. All the way, all those Southeastern shows on into 1987 are going to be on there. And then I had another company that once I sold Southeastern called USA Championship Wrestling. That'll be the first one to go on there. And I'm going to take all these wrestling shows, and instead of just putting on there a TV show and they can watch one and then they pick another one, I'm going to put them in a sequence, in the actual sequence in which they were recorded, so that everybody can follow the storyline and the angles, because that's what made wrestling great. Mm-hmm. And when you just see one and then you pick another one, it's 3 years later, the wrestlers are all different, the angles are all gone. You put it in that sequence, and that's where fans will be able to go to find out what real television, why TV made wrestling.
Excellent.
It's kind of the equivalent of people going on to Netflix and picking a show and doing the binge watching. They can watch several seasons, so they can come on and watch yours. And like you said, instead of being scattered, they can binge watch 10 episodes and be able to follow all the stories and all the characters.
Absolutely. And I mean, that makes all the difference in the world. And especially with some things, but television wrestling shows, the way my companies were run, every show had a storyline. You had to tune in the next week to find out where you're going. And, you know, and it's never been done that way on YouTube so far as I know. And these are going to be all in the sequence, the best way we can to put them in sequence. And fans will be able to follow all that stuff that they never can now.
Excellent. Well, we want to thank you, Ron. This was a tremendous time. You know, you're always invited back anytime. Me and Andy are all about deep history. Elio, we're dragging him slowly into deep history. So you're helping kickstart us to dig deeper. So we appreciate you. And thank you very much for coming on today.
Yes,
thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
All right, folks. Well, that was Ron Fuller, the Tennessee stud, who once again came on and told us some amazing history, some amazing stuff. We look forward to seeing you all next week on an upcoming edition of WPOV Quarantine. Have yourselves a good day.